Well, that's a great segue into the fact that last week when we read Esther, we didn't know we'd be in Persia for the whole last week, thinking about modern day Persia. But to something that you said, Philip, which is miscalculation, political miscalculation. That's what we finished with last week. Was Haman goes back to his family and says to them, "Look, she asked for me to come to a party, just me and the king, right? Her, and the king, right?" And then he says, "But I can't get that Mordecai out of my head. I can't get that Jew out of my head." And then the Zeresh, his wife, and the friend said, "Let's hang that guy on a gallows, right? Let's get him up there so everyone can see his body." Which, by the way, the Persians still do. Iran does this regularly. I didn't show you any of the pictures because it's gruesome. I don't like looking at it. But when Iran has a enemy that they want to humiliate, so they want to torture and murder and then show the body, they'll hang it up on a light post, and they'll do that to the people that they think are political problems, for spies that they think are spying for Israel, and they do it to homosexuals because that's what they do there, and they still do that. So 50 cubits high seems pretty high. It's 75 feet, but they do pretty high. Let's not worry about the height. Let's understand that that mentality, unfortunately, is still there. But yeah, Haman's family miscalculated. They miscalculated the situation, right? And so they thought that maybe they had an opening. And again, who knows? Well, maybe we'll know later. Maybe we'll never know whether this was the time that Iran was close to getting their nuclear bomb, or maybe this was just the right place at the right time. But a lot of people point to this place right now, this chapter, this end of this chapter, beginning of this chapter, where God is manifesting quietly, hidden. But God does something here to fix the situation. This moment, right here between the chapters, is where God works the magic. This is where the genie comes to fix everything. And it's this moment, it's this thing, it's one little thing that causes everything to fall apart for this plan. And we're going to see at the end, because if you know the story of Esther a little bit, you think you know the story of Esther. You think that the story ends with Haman being defeated. It's not the way the story ends. You're going to be reminded, if you forgot, that's not where the story ends. And it's a good reminder that we don't know where this story is going to end either. The one that we're watching unfold right now in front of our eyes on CNN and Fox News and wherever else we're watching it. So, News Nation, Newsmax, wherever you're watching it. All right. It's probably not on CBS with Walter Cronkite. All right. So that night, speaking of it, Rosemary, if you'd take over.
That night, sleep deserted the king, and he ordered the book of records, the annals, to be brought, and it was read to the king. There it was found written that Mordecai had denounced Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, who had plotted to do away with King Ahasuerus.
Yeah. So God made him wake up. God gave him a bad night's sleep. That's the miracle. That's all it took, was for Ahasuerus to have a bad night's sleep. Because when he had the bad night's sleep, that's when he went and got the records out. He says, "You bring the, get these records." So he
Didn't
orders
have
them.
books on tape.
Yeah, he needs. It's boring. Yeah, maybe I'll be bored enough to go back to sleep after reading my files. So he brings them to them, and he reads that nothing ever happened to Mordecai when he saved him from that plot. He never did that. So again, this is very fortuitous. It's too fortuitous. It's too coincidental that this happens exactly at the moment that it needs to. So this is God. This is now, okay, you can understand why the traditional answer was that this was God, but there's also an element of just absurdity to this. And again, it's a little bit of a farce. But there's also an immense truth to this, is how many times in history has history been decided by something ridiculous? Some ridiculous relationship or some ridiculous obsession that somebody has with somebody or some woman or some whatever that makes everything go nuts. You know, how, again, some people say, yeah, but there's a force of history that makes these things happen. You know, there's something that, will, and that's kind of like, the Forrest Gump thing where there's just some guy who's always there or something, or some weird thing happened and that made the other thing happen. And again, some people say, but there's a force behind it. Like, even if there hadn't been a Hitler, there would have had to been something that would have started World War II, or something would have started World War I, or something would have started the Civil War. In big moments that are like inevitable. And even if, like, it's those kind of time travel movies where you can go back and try to fix it, but it's not going to stop it. It's going to happen anyways. Something's going to lead to this. Okay, maybe. But there is something ultimately very truthful about this, which is that at a certain time, if somebody does a certain thing and pulls a certain lever, things go very different, and we don't know how that happens. If you want to call that God, okay. If you want to call that random chance, okay. But there's things that happen that have no explanation in a rational way. And one can make the argument now, and I definitely can make the argument now, after watching the last 2 years unfold and then throughout my life, but the last 2 years in particular, how can you not say that something is happening with the Jewish people that defies rational explanation? There is no rational explanation why a group of people that are literally a statistical anomaly compared to the Chinese or almost any other Indian or any other ethnicity, how are they at the forefront of every major thing that happens in history, and especially literally right now? I mean, this is unbelievable. You can say whatever, it's because of Israel, because of this, because of the Middle East, but there's something that is not rational. And I don't want to say this is a miracle. I don't want to say this is God. But you can't say it's scientifically explained. It can't be. There's no rational explanation for it. Why is the world obsessed with the Jewish people? It's not, it's not a normal psychological explanation for this. There's no, forget psychology, forget mathematical probability. It's everything. And so when I read this, and especially reading this now, it gives me the chills, because this group of people that Haman doesn't even mention, he doesn't even call out their names. Would Ahasuerus even, like, does he even care? Should he even care? One people, it's one of his little groups in his whole empire. He started out 120. It's literally the first line of the book. There's 127 Medinot. There's 127 states and countries within his empire. And this one doesn't even have land really to speak of. I mean, they did a little tiny Yehud, this little tiny part of their empire that they had given Cyrus, his ancestor, his, maybe literally his ancestor, but his spiritual ancestor. By the way, it's my friend from Iran that's calling me right now. He's not in Iran, but my Persian friend calling me right now. Yeah, yeah, this one little group in the world causes this to unfold. All right. So what's been done for this guy? What's been done? He tried to, they tried to kill me. He saved my life. What's been done for this guy, Mordecai?
What honor or advancement has been conferred on Mordecai for this? The king inquired. Nothing at all has been done for him, replied the king's servants who were in attendance on him. Who is in the court? The king asked, for Haman had just entered the outer court of the royal palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai impaled on the stake he had prepared for him. It is Haman standing in the court, the king's servants answered him. Let him enter, said the king. Haman entered, and the king asked him, What should be done for a man whom the king desires to honor? Haman said to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? So Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king desires to honor, let royal garb that the king has worn be brought, and a horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal diadem has been set. And let the attire and the horse be put in the charge of one of the king's noble courtiers. And let the man whom the king desires to honor be attired and paraded on the horse through the city square while they proclaim before him, this is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor. Quick then, said the king to Haman, get the garb and the horse, as you have said, and do this to Mordecai the Jew who sits in the king's gate. Omit nothing of all you have proposed.
You can't read that without laughing. Haman has come in to ask for Mordecai to be executed, and it turns out he's now got to make him like the king for a day. He's king for the day. And the funny thing is that Ahasuerus knows he's a Jew. He calls him Mordecai the Jew. He actually calls him Mordecai Ayodi. He knows he's Jewish. So everything that he just planned, his heart sink, whatever you want to say, his the feeling that he just had of this great plan he had is just he's just been kicked in, yeah, whatever you want to say. He has been this is the worst, and it's just literally flipped. In this moment, everything just got flipped. It is the moment in Jewish history where when you thought you were dead and now it's completely different. Now you are in charge. Now you actually get to call the shots. And it's, I mean, people have it in life. They thought they were going to get fired, and it turns out they got a promotion. You didn't like that boss? Well, we got rid of him, and now you're now the boss. I mean, that's the kind of moment that somebody just had, which is on the good side. For the good people. For the bad people, it's literally coming in thinking you're getting the promotion and you got fired. You came in and you said you were all excited about, what you're going to do in your new office. And they said, oh yeah, you don't have an office anymore. That's what happened to him. But for us, yeah, Mordecai is something. This is a big switch. This isn't a little switch. This isn't, oh, it's okay. Get to survive. We survived this purge. We survived, whatever. No, it's a complete opposite. It's a flip. And that's what it is. It's a flip. That's why this chapter is so critical. So King says, you just ordered it up. Give it to him. Go get it to Mordecai. Oh my gosh.
So Haman took the garb and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and paraded him through the city square. And he proclaimed before him, this is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate while Haman hurried home, his head covered in mourning.
Yeah, this has not been a good day. Not a good day.
There, Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had befallen him. His advisers and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish stock, you will not overcome him. You will fall before him to your ruin.
Yeah, so suddenly his wife, who was full of such great ideas before, it's a great scene. And by the way, the women play a big role in this. We forget about, a lot of people forget about Vashti. A lot of people forget about, Esther, we can't forget. It's the name of the book. But the other women we forget about. Vashti kind of goes in the background. Zeresh, most people don't even remember that she's in the story. She's the one who gives them the idea of asking for the gallows, which is, a critical scene, that gallows being built, and that gallows, right, becomes a critical place for this story. It's in the background. So I feel like if you're building the set for this, you've got to have the gallows on the stage because it's there in the background, these gallows. And now his wife was full of such great ideas about what to do with Mordecai. By the way, the fact that he never told his wife that Mordecai was Jewish seems to be critical. She says, "You never told me that. You never told me that he was Jewish. Why didn't you tell me that?" Right? It's a crazy story because the woman here kind of says, "Oh yeah, yeah, you screwed up. I I I could have told you that." Um, you know, in the midrash, she's um, in the midrash, she's as anti-Semitic as her husband is. She doesn't get off from being anti-Semitic, but she's smarter than her husband. In the midrash, there's a little bit more about her, which is that she is, um, uh, that uh, she's the smarter one of the two, but also maybe also, a little because she's, um, well, I'm not going to ruin it because we don't know exactly what happens to her at the end of the story. Um, but yeah, she's full of, oh yeah, I told you so. It's kind of like it's kind of like um, the honeymooners, it's kind of like whenever Ralph comes home and does something stupid, Alice
It's not
goes,
just her, it's all his advisors.
I know, but I know, you're right. So, but yeah, it's true. It is but she's called out by name.
Mhm.
There's all these weird midrashim about her that like she wanted to come to the party at the beginning of the story that Vashti didn't invite her at the beginning, which is why she has these you know machinations to get rid of Vashti, and it's just weird that they called her out by name. And again, it's another one of the women in the story that we sometimes forget that women are like players. They're especially in the Persian court, they're players here. So yeah, I told you so. And here's the last line of the chapter.
While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurriedly brought him into the banquet that Esther had prepared.
So he can't even languish in his misery for too long because he's got to go to this party. But you can see things are now falling apart. And it's meant to be funny. I mean, the story has to be, you have to laugh when you read it. You cannot take the story that seriously because the scenes in it, the way it's set up, it's all about timing, right? And that's what they said, right? What's comedy? It's tragedy, tragedy plus timing, right? It's it's you got to have you got to see the scene as it's playing out, and the fact that like they're making this book more than any other book is about timing. It's about well, no, you it didn't just happen. It happened then. That night is the night that he has this insomnia. Like it's really critical of hitting the right timing on this and the direction in this is super important as a book. There's no book in the Bible that has as many of these. Oh, and at that moment they came in and said, "Gotcha." So it's really important.
This, Rabbi,
Yeah.
this is like a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode.
Yes. Yes. And it is. It's cringy. It's cringy. So um and it's what makes it funny. I mean, that I don't know who said that tragedy plus timing. I don't know who said that about comedy, but that's why this is funny because of the timing. If it was just and then something bad happened, the next day or whatever, then again, that the scene ends there without that last kicker, which is and then the guys come in and pull him out to the party. That scene, that line is critical, and it's there, and it's in the Bible, and it's meant to be funny. I mean, it's meant to be farcical. So you can laugh. All right. So here's the party scene.
So the king and Haman came to the feast with Queen Esther. On the second day, the king again asked Esther at the wine feast, "What is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be fulfilled." Queen Esther replied, "If your majesty will do me the favor, and if it pleases your majesty, let my life be granted me as my wish, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, massacred, and exterminated. Had we only been sold as bondmen and bondwomen, I would have kept silent, for the adversary is not worthy of the king's trouble." Thereupon King Ahasuerus demanded of Queen Esther, "Who is he and where is he who dared to do this?"
So this is the moment that Esther finally reveals. This is the reveal that and she actually hasn't even said she's Jewish. I mean, we know that Ahasuerus knows what a Jew is because he just said Mordecai, the Jew. He knows that Mordecai is Jewish. He knows that they're Jews. By the way, Haman knows that because he said, "I'll do that for Mordecai the Jew." So he knows that. So he's already now, when Haman hears this in front of him, now he's just found out that Esther is Jewish. He's literally in that moment where she says, I only want my life. First of all, it's a beautiful way of negotiating, right? Of saying, well, here's what I really want. No, I'm going to die because of this guy. And again, she doesn't say you did it, because at the end of the day, he did it. Ahasuerus did it. He's the one who signed it. It can't happen unless Ahasuerus signed off on it. There is no massacring if Ahasuerus didn't say, "Yeah, we're going to kill all the." But Ahasuerus doesn't know that he had signed the death warrant for his wife. He didn't know that. But he was too stupid to ask. He didn't ask. He never asked who the people were. In all fairness, Esther never told him she was Jewish anyways. Well, what would have happened, if he had asked? What if that, you could say, well, that's part of the humor of this. But it's not, because people do dumb things like this all the time. And this is another truth. They don't think about the consequences of their actions. They don't ask, what's in the bill, right? You heard this.
Well,
Literally
Rabbi,
heard this a week ago. People signed a bill and they said, "I didn't know it was in there." How did you not
Rabbi,
know? I don't read it. I didn't read it. I hire people to read it. You
Rabbi,
literally saw this happen in Congress a week ago. How could you
we,
not say that this is ultimately one of the most truthful books of the Bible?
we always assume that the person you are dating or you marry or live with or whatever, everything about them. And I want to relate back. Remember when?
Well, Philip,
No,
yes, you could probably speak to this a great deal because of your work as a family lawyer. But yeah,
right.
you're 100% right. This is
But
also a big thing to conceal from your husband. But yeah,
right. But wait,
so
wait,
Philip,
wait.
why don't you regale us with a story or two of people who never told their husbands something, or their wives? Let's be gender equal on this.
No, I want to go back.
Don't tell us a tale, but
I want to go back to a story that Joe Buchanan told us when he came to sing.
yeah.
And this is a fascinating story to me. So Joe Buchanan meets the woman who he marries because she walks into a store that he was working at, and he immediately saw her and decided that was it. And they get married, and they're married for like 13 years. And he said they were in Washington, D.C. with their daughter. They went to the Holocaust Museum. And when they came out, his wife said to Buchanan, "I really need, or I want to get more in touch with my people and my religion." And Joe Buchanan looked at her and said, "What are you talking about?" He didn't know.
Yeah, wait, did you say,
that
wait,
she
I'm
was
sorry,
Jewish.
did you say where they were when she said that?
Yeah, they had just left the Holocaust Museum
The Holocaust
in
Museum.
Washington,
Yeah, that's
D.C.
critical. That's
And
the moment that she said,
right.
I got to learn more about my
Yeah.
people. After seeing the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C. Amazing.
Right. So we can infer from that either she never told Joe Buchanan that she was Jewish, or maybe she did, and
She
he
didn't.
didn't hear
Joe's
it
told. I
or
mean,
didn't
you don't have to
process
infer
it.
it. Joe told me.
No, yeah. So here's a woman, who marries a Christian and never tells him, oh, by the way, I'm Jewish. And then to show you how even crazier it is, he went to her sister's Jewish wedding. He told us this. And it was a Jewish wedding, and he still didn't put two and two together.
Yeah, well, I have a
Right?
feeling it must not have been that Jewish of a wedding, but listen, I mean, I think there's a lot of cases. You've probably had a lot of cases where spouses did not disclose everything to their spouse before they got married. Correct, Philip?
Yes. Normally, the cases that I deal with as a family law attorney or have dealt with in the past, the following. Usually has to do with money. The spouse didn't know
Who would have thought?
that their
Who would have thunk
partner
it?
was massively in debt. They didn't know. There have been more than a few cases, and this is very common. It's more common than you think. They get married, and then they find out their spouse is either bisexual or gay. And I know it sounds like, well, why would they get married? But up until recently, I'm not talking about since same-sex marriage became the law. Before that, it's very common for, I say very common, but it did happen more than you would think, that people who are gay would get married,
Yep.
because she couldn't be married in a same-sex marriage. That happened a lot, that often. I had a woman came in a few years ago, and her husband was divorcing her, and she said, I didn't know he was gay. And I said, come on, he worked in musical theater. Maybe I
Well,
shouldn't
no,
have said that.
I
But,
understand.
but,
But I will tell you, it doesn't surprise me.
She knew he was gay when they got married, and they had kids together.
Yeah.
But yeah, people, that happens a lot. It happens more. The majority of non-disclosure has to do with money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's one of them. We just read one of them, a big one. So he just finds out his wife's Jewish. He just finds out that he ordered her, but she doesn't blame him. She blames Haman, which is really smart. But look, I mean, it is Haman's fault. Ahasuerus wouldn't have signed this if Haman hadn't come to him with it. But look, Ahasuerus at least bears some responsibility, and she doesn't say that to him. She doesn't say, "Husband, you screwed up. Why did you not write? Why did you write this in the first place?" Now you know that he can order her executed or thrown out, or we know that because of the setup with Vashti, we know that the queen is not in a good situation. We know that it's a dangerous situation. And the best situation, we already read about a queen who got excommunicated and thrown out or maybe killed. So we know that's been already established. The story established it right off the bat. So, when Ahasuerus says, "Who is he who dared do this to you?" She could point at him and go, "You did." That's another way the story could have gone, right? We had that. We've had one of those in the Bible. Who made you pregnant? You did, Judah. When Tamar says to, when they're about to execute her for adultery, who got you pregnant? You did, Judah. That's a great reveal. The guy's guilty, and she frames, she doesn't frame him. She brings out the evidence. Could have happened, right? No, it's Haman. She points, well, let's see what happens.
The adversary and enemy, replied Esther, is this evil Haman. And Haman cringed in terror before the king and the queen.
He actually says, yes, he cringed in terror. This is cringy. I said it actually has the translation of the word is cringe. Uh, yeah. Yep.
She says Satan, does she?
What?
This the adversary is that Satan.
No.
No.
Interestingly, the Hebrew word is there's two words, right? There's adversary and enemy. So he's a tsar and oyev. The oyev, the word for oyev, enemy is the enemy, any kind of enemy, like, enemy in battle. Um, usually is oyevim, which are enemies. We usually don't have
You know,
one.
this
And
this
she
is
calls
like
him Haman Hara. She doesn't just call him Haman. Haman, the evil Haman, that evil Haman. Yeah.
this is like one of those reveals. This is like one of those reveals on a soap opera, like Days
Well,
of
oh
Our
yeah.
Lives.
There's a double. There's a
Oh, by
double
the way,
reveal.
Oh,
I'm
This is a
totally.
I'm
double
I'm
reveal. I'm Jewish, and he's trying to kill me. Or I'm Jewish, and who's trying to kill me? That guy right over there. So there's double. There's a double reveal.
I mean, I'm waiting for that dramatic music, that reveal
Exactly.
music, the
Da,
reveal music.
da.
Yeah, dun, dun. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's all about timing. Because now I watch this scene. This is very timing, very, very important.
The king, in his fury, left the wine feast for the palace garden, while Haman remained to plead with Queen Esther for his life, for he saw that the king had resolved to destroy him. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet room, Haman was lying prostrate on the couch on which Esther reclined. Is he attempting, cried the king, a conquest of the queen in my own palace? No sooner did these words leave the king's lips than Haman's face was covered.
Yeah, so the scene, that's the part of that scene, right? Haman gets on his knees, is like in front of her, pleading for his life, right? And, you know, the king had left because he was so angry. He's furious. He storms out of there, which is, crazy scene too, because he's so angry. He just storms out. And then when he comes back in, he sees Haman in a way that looks like he's trying to assault his wife, rape his wife, do something untoward to his wife. It doesn't matter how close he's getting to her. He's a guy. He's not supposed to come anywhere near his wife. And here he is in his own house. It's just made it even worse. Like you think it can't get worse for Haman. It got worse because now he thinks he's assaulting his wife. It's a crazy scene and it's very funny and it's all
Oh,
about timing.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I just got a news alert on my phone from the Wall Street Journal. This is probably your friend calling you. Trump has called on Iran to surrender without conditions.
Jeez. Well, he said he was going back for something bigger than a ceasefire. So, but that's pretty big. Yeah, I just don't understand how he asked for Tehran to be evacuated. It's a city of 10 million people. So it's almost biblical. This is almost biblical what he's saying. So let's hope, man. Let's hope that this is what we've been praying for. You saw my message for the weekend, I hope, which was this is hopefully a big part of a bigger plan. The way I look at it, my friends, my quote was that 2,500 years ago, the Persian Empire, King Cyrus, let us go back to Israel in dignity and freedom because we got to rebuild our temple and get to go back to our home. That was King Cyrus who brought us back from the Babylonian exile, right? We're going to read about it again. We kind of read about the setup for it, but we're going to read about it the end of the book of Chronicles. This is where the Bible ends with, was King Cyrus. We're going to read about it soon. I said, now, 2,500 years later, let's return the favor. So I'm hoping that it's Israel who gets to return the favor of giving freedom back to the Iranians. All right, so at that moment,
Then Harbonah, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, what is more, a stake is standing in Haman's house 50 cubits high, which Haman made from Mordecai, the man whose words saved the king. Impale him on it, the king ordered. So they impaled Haman on the stake that he had put up for Mordecai, and the king's fury abated.
I feel better now. King Phyllis, I feel better now. We 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 killed Haman. Now I feel a lot better. I feel my fury is gone now. I feel better. It seems like his fury was um, pretty much that someone tried to do something to his wife. That seems to be his problem. His problem is protecting his property, protecting his wife. We haven't gotten to the Jews yet, by the way. And guess what? Haman's gone. Haman just died. It's chapter 7. There's 3 more chapters. They're quick chapters, by the way. One of the chapters is like 1 verse, but yeah, there's 3 more chapters going to hit us with. Yeah, like 10 is not a chapter. 10 is like an extra line that got in that they couldn't put with chapter 9. But yeah, so the villain is dead. Why is the story still going on? And this is like one of those movies where the bad guy gets killed and there's still 20 minutes left. And you're like, wait a second. I thought the
Yes.
movie's over. You killed the bad guy off. What's going to happen now? And
This is the return of the king.
that's true. There's another, what was it, another hour and a half after that? Yeah, there's more stuff happening because stuff has been in play, right? This is not about Haman anymore. This is not about Ahasuerus. This is not about Esther or Mordecai. There is more at stake here than those 4 people, and one of them's now dead. But this is now involved the whole known world at the time. The Persian Empire is not. This has not been fixed. So again, look, same thing could have happened. If Khomeini had been killed 2 days ago, and supposedly, again, everybody told you, and you got to believe it, Israel knew how to take him out. That could have been the end. Israel knows killing one person is not usually the answer. I mean, guess what? You don't think Israel could have killed Yasser Arafat over 40 years? You don't think Israel was able to like kill virtually any enemy that they had for 40 years? Sometimes not in time. You don't think they could have killed Yasser Arafat? They didn't want to. I mean, you can talk about why that was, and people will speculate forever about why that was. You know, maybe he was working with Israel the whole time, from the far-fetched to the more, probable, which is that Israel knew he was a lunatic, but at least they knew what he was going to do, and they figured he's as an enemy better than some of the other options. I mean, who knows? But you don't think that's the case. So sometimes doing away with the enemy, with the villain, isn't the end of the story. Another true statement, right? Nothing more true than that, because it's not in the movies. That's life, right? This is true. So timing, it continues.
Okay. That very day, King Ahasuerus gave the property of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Mordecai presented himself to the king, for Esther had revealed how he was related to her. The king slipped off his ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put Mordecai in charge of Haman's property.
Now that's a weird thing, because Haman was obviously very rich. He was the vizier, he was second in command, whatever you want to say. And now Mordecai gets all his stuff. That's part of the story. That's part of the story. And so Mordecai now gets his job, gets his stuff, gets his house, gets all his property. It's weird, because you don't think about this as being part of the story, but it's part of the story. Mordecai now is like Ahasuerus' right-hand man. He just got promoted. Promoted, you can't get much higher. So he's like Joseph, which, by the way, the rabbis point out. Mordecai and Joseph are very similar in that they get to be the assistant to the king or the ruler, right? And Mordecai does it by being, a good guy and being in the right place at the right time. But remember, it's Pharaoh's dreams that wind up making Joseph in charge, and it's Ahasuerus' lack of sleep that remind him that Mordecai needs to be promoted. And so all of this seems very familiar. There's a little deja vu effect. And what do both of those people have in common? Well, both of them, both Mordecai and, you got to think about from the rabbinic standpoint, because they're always looking at lineage, they're always looking at descendants and, ancestors and connections. So what's the connection? What's the connection between Mordecai and Joseph? They have a common ancestor.
Mhm.
Not what you think. Yeah, because we're all related to Abraham, Isaac, and
Benjaminites,
Jacob.
right?
They're all related to who?
Rachel.
Rachel.
That's right. Give it up for Rachel. These are Rachel's descendants. Rachel, the really great deceiver in the background, the one who Jacob really loved, the one who unfortunately doesn't get to live out her life as long as her sister, but the one who is always in the background mixing it up. So her descendants, both Joseph, her immediate descendant, her son, and then many, many years later, her descendant through Benjamin, Mordecai, gets to be the one who makes things happen. So it's Rachel. She's the connector.
Do you know if in ancient Persia women were allowed to own property?
Uh, don't we don't know if a queen had the ability to do what just happened. Yeah. But again, the king gave Mordecai the ring. So the ring he did.
Mhm.
But yeah, Mordecai getting the property is an interesting thing because why would
He's in
Haman's
charge
property?
of the property, but it belongs to Esther.
Correct. That
So,
the chain of
I mean,
provenance went
I
from.
know women could have property in Egypt,
It's just a strange thing. Now,
but I don't
the
know about
administration of the property, there's no question. How could she have? She's living in a palace. Assumedly, again, keep this in mind, at least from the mind of the author or the imagination on this, she's never going to step foot outside the palace again.
Persia.
She's never going outside of the palace. I mean, think about that. She's almost a prisoner. I don't want to get over dramatic, but she doesn't get to leave.
Hey, Rabbi,
Yeah.
I came in late. I wasn't here
Yeah.
last week, but how did the chain? How did Esther and the chain meet? Do we know? How did that
Yes.
happen?
So yes, and the first you got to read back into the chapter. It's a very quick scene. Chapter 2, Esther is part of the beauty pageant.
Oh,
She's the
okay,
one
I remember
chosen
that.
to be she's
Yes.
the one chosen to be the queen by Ahasuerus. He found her charming, enough
So
charming.
basically, he does what a lot of rich guys did. Um, there was a chorus line, and he picked her
Yes.
out of it.
Yes, this is what happened through most of human history. So, yeah, so everything's good with Haman, right? Haman's property has now been taken over, everything. But here's the problem.
Esther spoke to the king again, falling at his feet and weeping, and pleading with him to avert the evil plotted by Haman the Agagite against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter to Esther, and Esther arose and stood before the king. "If it please your majesty," she said, "and if I have won your favor, and the proposal seems right to your majesty, and if I am pleasing to you, let dispatches be written countermanding those that were written by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, embodying his plot to annihilate the Jews throughout the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see the disaster that will befall my people? And how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?"
Yeah. So, you kind of forgot Ahasuerus. You've got, I mean, we're okay here with Haman. He's gone. But what about the death order that you set out for all the Jews throughout the kingdom? How are we going to stop that? Now you'd think like, and again, this is where the story ends. Like when we do Purim spiels and we tell it to kids, this is where the story ends. The story ends with Haman being hung, and that's it. Because like your instinct is once Haman is gone, the evil is over, right? It's done. We can all live happily ever after. But that's not the way the story gives it. And it is, again, one of those truths of the story, which is that the evil that people do oftentimes far outlasts their actual physical presence, especially when they're powerful, especially when they have political power. that the things that they do, have a lasting impact on their country and on their people. It doesn't end, the Soviet Union didn't end with the fall of the Soviet Union, and the specter of that. And, you know, Pauline and I were talking about this the other day, the impact of, 70 years of gulags and of a dictatorship that robbed people of their dignity, of their freedom. Guess what? It's still having an effect on the Russian people, my friends. If you don't think that you can tie a direct line from Putin to Lenin and Stalin, you're living in a fantasy world. This is a truth that the Bible tells and history tells us, which is that this is not that the person dying who's responsible for this bad stuff is not oftentimes the end. Now, this is a weird one because it's an edict, and this is like, back in the day when somebody could write something as an edict and it has to be enforced because the emperor said so. But she says, look, we haven't done anything about this. Yeah, and folks, you were right. It was my friend, my Persian, not Gentile friend. He's not Jewish. He texted me and said, this is amazing. He said, his exact words were, and his name is Reza, right? He said, are you watching this? Unconditional surrender. This is amazing. So, yeah. And as Floyd just, again, giving us the Shakespeare quote. Can you read it, Floyd? Because you'll read it much better than I did, from Julius Caesar. Floyd, can you give us the Julius Caesar line? All right. Well, I will do it since he laid it when you texted it to me. There he goes.
Yeah. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones.
Yeah. That is a powerful line for thinking about Haman and Ahasuerus 2,500 years ago and the people who are alive right now watching it. So, yeah, how are some of our leaders going to be remembered? And yeah, that could be on a few memorials in Washington, D.C. today. So Esther says, what about, what are we going to do? So this is the last chapters. The last chapters are what happened. So again, people forget this part. Most people think the story ends with Haman being hung, impaled. Impaled, by the way, impaled, not hung. Here's what happens.
Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, I have given Haman's property to Esther, and he has been impaled on the stake for scheming against the Jews. And you may further write with regard to the Jews as you see fit. Write it in the king's name and seal it with the king's signet, for an edict that has been written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet may not be revoked.
So this is a weird thing, which is not true. It's not true. It's not true in the Persian Empire. People have said, this is a weird thing to say. And it's part of the humor and part of the timing and whatever you want to say of the book, which is, what are you talking about? The Persians couldn't undo a rule that they put out. That's ridiculous. No country has ever had a law system based on the fact that they can't revise something that even our Constitution, which we don't like changing, by the way, we hate changing the Constitution, makes us nuts for some reason. Can't do it. Well, there should definitely be a conservative approach to changing the Constitution. Even that we change. Even that we can amend. So, well, yeah, this is even more ridiculous, you could ask. He can't countermand an edict he already had. So they're basically saying, well, he already made one edict, so you can't undo that edict, but you can make a new edict. So you can come up with a new edict. So this is meant to be farcical because there is nothing like this. People have looked through Persian records, and there are a lot of Persian records because the Persians kept records, the Greeks kept records of the Persian records. We have Persian records. There's nothing like this that anyone's ever found because it's absurd. It's absurd on any, like, no one would do this. Like, I'm going to bind my hands by saying I make an edict and I can never change it. It's ridiculous. So it's not probably meant to be true from the standpoint of like this happened, but there's a way for this to now become something, right? And so this is a setup, if you will, for what happens now, which is this is the real end of this story, which is that now you have the ring, do what you want with it, Jews. Jews, you're in control. This is the real weird part, which I tell people is the weird ending to Inglorious Bastards, which people like, they've called it, Jewish violence fantasies. But this idea that if we could have, would we have done what happens at the end of Inglorious Bastards? That's what this is. That until Inglorious Bastards came out, I didn't really know how to explain this. Now I can. Not that you should go out and rent it or watch it and see that, because if you don't like Tarantino and you don't like violence, and by the way, Tarantino lives in Israel right now. I wonder what he posted. I didn't even think what he posted because he's in Tel Aviv most of the time now. I wonder what happened when he was during these rockets, because he's living in Israel, folks. He's more Israeli than I am today. I never thought that would happen, but yes. And I don't know Quentin Tarantino. I don't want to imply that I do, but I find it ironic that he's more Israeli than I am today. Anyways, but I am a fan, and I am, but I'm not super fan of violence, but that is what happens now. This is the Persian Inglorious Bastards. Here it is.
So the king's scribes were summoned at that time on the 23rd day of the third month, that is, the month of Sivan, and letters were written at Mordecai's dictation to the Jews and to the satraps, the governors, and the officials of the 127 provinces from India to Kush, every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language.
Yeah, before we get to that, I'm going to tell you something really weird. Oh, that's pretty weird. You know what I'm about to tell you, right? It says that they come out with this edict on the 23rd of the month, right? So this was about 2 months after Haman starts his thing, right? So that, remember, it was supposed to be in Adar when he did this, right? So I mean, the murder is supposed to be in Adar. He did it in Nisan, and this is the next month in Sivan, is when he does this thing. So he has the month of Nisan, the month of Iyar, which was, and then the month of Sivan. Right? This is the 23rd day of the month of Sivan. That's when he wrote this edict. Guess what day it is today, folks? It's not the 23rd. That would be too weird. It's the 21st. It's 2 days before. So when Rosemary just read the 23rd day of Sivan, I got a little bit chills because it happens to be, that will be Juneteenth this year, is the 23rd of Sivan. Weird, right? So yeah. So this is the day that edict goes into effect. So I'm pointing this out because this is only 2 months after they sit down to do it, right? At Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. So he sat down in Nisan to draw the poor, to basically say, in a year from now, 11 months from now, we're going to have this great murder of the Jews. 2 months later, they sit down and write this letter, right? 2 months later. This is important because I want you to understand the timing of this. Some of the timing of this is immediate. It's the he comes in and he falls down and everyone laughs. That's not what this is. This is a long time. This is, we got months for this stuff to happen. Watch what happens. Because he says, I'm sending out this message. Mordecai sending out a message to the Jewish people and to all the people that got the messages before. So the Jews and the satraps are getting it, the governors, the officials, and 127 promises. We started out with the same thing, 127 provinces, everyone in their own script, everyone in their own language. And the Jews in their script, in their language, the Jews get this message too. Here's what it says.
He had them written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet. Letters were dispatched by mounted couriers riding steeds used in the king's service, bred of the royal stud.
Pretty serious about these horses.
To this effect, the king has permitted the Jews of every city to assemble and fight for their lives. If any people or province attacks them, they may destroy, massacre, and exterminate its armed force, together with women and children, and plunder their possessions. On a single day, in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely on the 13th day of the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar.
Yeah.
The text of the document was to be issued as a law in every single province. It was to be publicly displayed to all the peoples, so that the Jews should be ready for that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, mounted on royal steeds, went out in urgent haste at the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in the fortress Shushan.
Yeah. So, pretty wild. They get a new message, which is that the Jews get to fight back. And if anyone attacks the Jews, they'll kill you and they'll take your stuff. Now, here's the weird thing. They got 10 months, 9 months to prepare for this. This is not tomorrow it's going to happen. There's 9 months for the Jews to prepare, arm themselves, get their stuff together. And it also gives their enemies 9 months to prepare. Like, common sense would tell you the story's over. Is there really going to be a fight? Like, there's 9 months. And Ahasuerus has already told the people, if you lose everything. Jews have permission to take everything from you after they destroy you. Assumedly, I'm on their side now. Why would they do this? Why would they do this? By the way, I didn't realize until, again, reading the story, you know how you see things in the story that you didn't see before. I never really noticed the obsession on the horses. I never really saw it. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. And the fact that these are the royal horses, right? People are seeing that this message went out, in style. This message went out with this message really goes out. No, that's the thing. They have 9 months still. This is springtime. It's not happening until literally like next year. That's what I'm saying. This is not what you think it is, which is, the murder is going to happen. Haman was executed 9 months before this, the pogrom, if you will. Haman's gone.
And what struck me when I saw it was how slow everything happened, like to drag the cannons or whatever, how slow. There was no shock that it was coming, and they'd stop for dinner. Or stop to then have a pause to pull their jet off or their
Yeah.
It was just things did not move fast.
No, but here's the thing. This is their initial edict. I wanted to show it to you because I just turned back the page. I turned back the Megillah. I turned back the scroll. It's chapter 3. Remember when Haman came up with his edict, it says written instructions were dispatched by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy him. Now that's different than what you just read, right? It's different. It's not the same, right? Now again, it says they were sent out post haste on the royal mission. It's not like they went slow, but that's not what you just saw, right? That's not the that's not the that's not the level of intensity that just went out with this new message, right? The new message goes out super fast with again these steeds, these royal bred of the royal stud. No, I mean, look, this is what it says, right? That it goes out fast. The couriers now mounted on royal steeds. I mean, we could assume before they were like taking camels or they were going out, maybe by foot. Um, wouldn't the non-Jews have taken the property or the Jew? Oh yeah, yeah. In the beginning, oh yeah, no, the edict is now reversed though, right? Which is now if you attack the Jews are taking your stuff. Yeah. Yeah, other than the fact that now that everybody knows that the king is on the Jewish side. The king's on their side. I mean, common sense would tell you you have to be insane to be on the other side now. Haman's gone. The guy who came up with this edict is gone. He's dead. He's impaled, was on the bad side of Ahasuerus, and now you're going to continue this? So, yeah, it's pretty weird. Um, I somehow I went down I went down a rabbit hole as I was reading this. I started thinking about this, right? And I was thinking about the Pony Express, because that was like an American legend that we had this service that we had that was able to get messages, not cross country, by the way. You know where the Pony Express started? I know this, by the way, not because I'm a Pony Express expert, but I just read it.
In St.
Missouri,
Louis.
Missouri,
Yeah.
started in Missouri. Yeah. And so it's kind of the center of the country. It's still over 1,000 miles. I mean, it's still far, but it went from Missouri to California, right, to San Francisco. And it was critical, though, because it sent the message that we're going to make sure that California is part of the nation, right? Our nation stretches all the way to California, and we can get messages there in a matter of 10 days. So, so, so but it was big. It was a big deal. It was a big deal, and it was a huge loss of. It was a huge disaster, by the way. It was a financial disaster to the people who invested in it. And by the way, do you know how long it lasted for? Anyone want to guess?
About 6 months, right?
It was 18 months, but yeah,
Okay.
it, it lasted about 18 months. I read. So it was not a long time, but of course, Wild Bill, rode and or at least claimed he rode. And then there's stories about it. And it was interesting too, because it was only like, I think like 4 riders got killed. Maybe 2 got killed or 4 got killed by Native Americans and a couple froze to death. But it was not like, it wasn't quite as dangerous as
The Rabbi, the early internet replaced the Pony
yes,
Express.
the telegram,
It-
the telegram replaced it. So it was
which-
technology. It got,
Yeah, which really is kind of like an internet if you think about it.
yeah. But there was something about that that's not only it's not only romantic or courageous about doing that kind of work, because that sounds like really courageous stuff, riding for 100 miles and then turning it over the bag to the next guy and he's riding it. It's there's something really kind of cool about that, working together. But but yeah, in reality, it got they were made redundant. But I thought about this, with this message getting out, and it was it was strange because I thought about what this meant in reality, and um, that literally Hitler killed himself on April 30th or April something, some time in April was when he took his last breath in this world. The Jews of Hungary were murdered up through May of of that year, I believe. So yeah, it it doesn't when the bad guy dies, it doesn't mean that that's the end of the death that they enact. So that they're responsible for. So yeah, there's a truth to this that's also very powerful, and in Jewish history, we've seen it enacted. So here we go. This is the end.
Mordecai left the king's presence in royal robes of blue and white, with a magnificent crown of gold and a mantle of fine linen and purple wool. And the city of Shushan rang with joyous cries. The Jews enjoyed light and gladness, happiness and honor. And in every province and in every city, when the king's command and decree arrived, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many of the people of the land professed to be Jews, for the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them.
That's not a line you hear a lot. The fear of the Jews. It is now. It is now. It is now. But for a long time, people would have read this story and said the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. That's really funny because their mind, there's a guy looking like Woody Allen walking around, and they're going, well, they're not going to hurt anybody, not anymore. Because number one, you don't have to be a big, strong Viking-looking guy to hurt somebody nowadays. And this is not the end of the story. This is not the end of the story. Because the feast and the holiday, you'd think, oh, well, that's Purim, right? No, that's not Purim yet, folks. This is the Haman is dead time. We have an edict that allows us to survive and protect ourselves now. We can defend ourselves. We can defend ourselves. So, common sense would tell you who's going to attack you now? Who's going to do this? That's, of course, what's going to happen. That's chapter 9. The weird thing, of course, that this story tells us is not that the Jews could defend themselves and they flipped the script and everything else, but that there were people who claimed to be Jewish who weren't Jewish. They were running around going, yeah, I'm Jewish. They wanted to be Jewish. They wanted to tell people that they were Jewish. So yeah, we laugh a little bit at this story because, wow, that happened. There was a time when people ran around saying, "Oh no, I'm Jewish." Would there ever be a time that people would do that?
Genealogy research, when they discuss DNA, these people are going on the Jewish sites when they're like, I'm 1% Jewish, or whatever, and they're all excited.
So Pauline just said there's people that are going on the DNA sites that are finding out they're 1% Jewish and are getting excited about it. You're 100% right, Pauline. We are starting to see this now for the first time. We're starting to see people who have 20% Jewish identity or 13% Jewish identity claiming it. When in the history would this have ever happened? Not since this period, which we don't even know if it really happened. This fantasy, is this a fantasy? I don't know, but we have it now. You're 100% right, Pauline. We have people who are claiming Jewish identity. Not only are they claiming Jewish identity, we have Jews today who are biologically 25% Jewish. 25% Jewish. Now, in some cases, 12.5% Jewish. They have one Jewish great grandparent biologically and are claiming their Jewish identity. Not in some cases claiming their Jewish identity, never have considered them anything less than Jewish. I have a friend who's a rabbi whose mother was a convert to Judaism. His wife was a convert to Judaism. So his kids were 1/4 biologically Jewish. Then they had kids. No doubt, they've never been anything other than Jewish. And I thought to myself, I said, this is a different world than we've ever had, at least that I've ever seen, where people have claimed Jewish identity. And again, during the Roman era, there was times when Romans were converting to Judaism as well. And they embraced Judaism because they were not happy with their Greco-Roman philosophies and their religious practices that existed in Rome. So there were cases of Romans who converted, but we don't know of people who claimed Jewish identity based on, 25% or less of Jewish identity. It just didn't happen. People ran away from it. The people in Germany and Austria who were so afraid that the Nazis or somebody would, they never lived a Jewish life. They never thought of themselves as Jewish, but they knew they had a Jewish grandparent, and they lived in fear that someone would find out that as a Mischling that they would be outed. Listen, it's not just Jews who've dealt with this. Obviously, there's African Americans. There's stories of people who could pass because they were 1/4 African American, and they passed as white. I mean, there's stories like that too. I mean, don't get me wrong, but and there were people like that had Native American ancestry that never wanted to claim it. Now they want to claim it. They want to, they could actually own part of a casino. I mean, I know people who've done that. They've claimed, Native American identity so they can get into a college. I mean, there's people who've done it. And I'm not saying it's only Jews, but this is really, really weird. This is a really weird fantasy that happens. And it happens to be a case that we live now with. I don't know. Yeah. Wait.
Shelley is a member of the Choctaw Nation.
Yep.
And so I joke with her that she's a member of 2 tribes.
That's true. Yeah. Pauline, what do you say?
But I wonder how many Choctaw Nation members are Jewish.
No, it's not. There's not many. Yeah. Wait, but Pauline was saying something here. Sorry, Pauline.
Safety when you feel safer or more afraid of one thing.
Yep.
Safer with another thing.
Yeah. So Pauline is saying if you feel safe, right? And that's true. But now we've almost come out of a situation, ironically, where safety became less of an issue, right? For Jews, it did. I'm talking about before 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or 6 years, whatever. Before 2015, before 14, whatever. Before that time, the safety wasn't as much of an issue for Jews, and then there was this new thing of DNA and people finding out their Jewish identity and coming forward and feeling good. And now that there's a safety issue, you wonder whether it's going to change. I can tell you it's not changing, Pauline. We still have people that are claiming Jewish identity and wanting to be a part of the Jewish people because they are amazed and intrigued by this whole thing, even the dark part of it, even the bad side of it. So we're here at chapter 9. The Jews have been given permission to defend themselves. You wonder who's going to attack us, because is it possible that people are going to attack us? And sure enough, we get to Purim, and here's what happened.
And so on the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, when the king's commanded decree were to be executed, the very day on which the enemies of the Jews had expected to get them in their power, the opposite happened, And the Jews got their enemies in their power.
Which, by the way, tells you that there were more enemies than just Haman. Haman was not the only enemy. Everybody else who hated the Jews during this at this time was like, this is our time. We can attack them. And they didn't get it? Really?
Throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the Jews mustered in their cities to attack those who sought their hurt, and not a single one could withstand them, for the fear of them had fallen upon all the peoples. Indeed, all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's stewards showed deference to the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them.
Which, by the way, means that Jews were not just living in Persia. They were not just living in the land of Israel. They were living all throughout the Persian Empire at the time, which, as you heard, was from India all the way to Africa. And that is true. Those are the borders of this empire. So Jews were living all over them, and it's all over the empire. And it says that in those different states, in those different parts of the empire, that the governors, the leadership in those places showed deference to the Jews. They weren't Jewish, but they realized that the Jews were in charge to some extent now because Mordecai was Jewish. And so Mordecai being kind of the number 2 guy in the empire, we better be careful, right? We better not mess with the Jews because of Mordecai. And again, it seems like the Jews are now very well connected. They're very well connected. You hear some of the same things today. As much as there's anti-Semitism, there's also this, wow, Jews are really well connected. Sometimes that manifests as anti-Semitism, and sometimes that manifests in this weird kind of admiration for the Jewish people, which I've noticed especially in my trips to China and in my interactions with people from China. They never meet Jews, or they very rarely meet Jews in China. And when they do, they're fascinated by them because they feel that they control the entire world. Why? Because their media has told them that, because anti-Semites have told them that, because the weird stuff that they see in the news when they see that this tiny little country, Israel, which they can't figure out, the Chinese cannot figure out why Israel has the power to make so much craziness in the world. I mean, whatever you want to say. How does the whole world focus on it? They don't understand, because their population is literally an aberration in the Chinese population. The Chinese miscalculating will be the population of Israel. Yes, that's a fact.
The Japanese have the same view.
Yeah, the Japanese do, but I'll tell you the difference is the Chinese are actually trying to figure out how to take over the world. I mean, they make no bones about it. They 100% feel that it's their time. The Chinese feel that we have enough people, that we're the largest, well, now they're second largest in population to India, but we have 1.5 billion people. We have the economic power. We need to be the ones in charge. I mean, there's people in India, by the way, who feel this way too, but there's a lot of people in China because they also have this military presence that they've been spending a lot of money on, and they've been expanding their territory throughout the South China Sea. You all read it, you know about it. They really do feel that somehow the Jews have figured out how to do it without having any people. And they're amazed by it.
If you watch the Netflix 2-season series, Tokyo Vice, or read his books, Jake Allison, who is the journalist, the American journalist in Japan, he's Jewish, but very secular. I mean, he doesn't observe anything. And the Japanese all think he's Mossad.
Yeah.
And they call him that. They call him Mossad.
Yeah, no, it is it's interesting.
He's from Missouri, and doesn't observe any Jewish anything.
I know.
But they think he's Mossad.
The funny thing is, Philip, is the guy who plays him on the actor, Ansel Elgort, who plays him, is Jewish. And no one knows Ansel Elgort's Jewish too. But anyways, there definitely is this weird, we don't know how they do it, but they do have this deference and this amazement with how we do what we do with having so few people. But they buy into a lot of the anti-Semitic tropes too, which is that we control everything. I mean, as far as I know, we don't control everything. I mean, there are Jews who have amazing positions of power and influence and wealth, but it's not like we're coordinating it. I sure doesn't seem like we sure doesn't seem like we're coordinating it. It doesn't seem like Larry Ellison and Brin and Zuckerberg are working together. Maybe I'm missing it. I'm not getting the notices. I'm definitely don't have the wealth to be getting to invited to the parties and to the places where this is happening. But yeah, the cabal has not offered me an invite.
Rabbi, when people
Yeah.
say to me that the Jews control all the money in the world, I say, well, how come I don't have a G6?
Yeah. Where's my G6?
Where's my G6?
So Mordecai,
Where's my Lambo? I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Mordecai is now in charge, and everyone knows it. But look what happens. Look what happens.
So you scroll back.
Oh, sorry.
For Mordecai was now powerful in the royal palace, and his fame was spreading through all the provinces. This man, Mordecai, was growing ever more powerful. So the Jews struck at their enemies with the sword, slaying and destroying. They wreaked their will upon their enemies. In the fortress Shushan, the Jews killed a total of 500 of them. They also killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vaizatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the foe of the Jews. But they did not lay hands on the spoil.
So Haman had 10 sons. They all died too. And again, 500 people in Shushan. So there were people in Shushan, in their own city where Mordecai lives, with all his power, with all his whatever. There were people there that were enemies. They were killed. But it says they didn't lay their hands on the spoil.
When the number of those slain in the fortress Shushan was reported on that same day to the king said to Queen Esther, "In the fortress Shushan alone, the Jews have killed a total of 500, as well as the 10 sons of Haman. What then must they have done in the provinces of the realm? What is your wish now? It shall be granted you. And what else is your request? It shall be fulfilled."
Yeah, so this is his line, right? What is your wish? Well, like whatever you want, queen. And you notice now that Hashvarosh is nudging her, going, "Look at your people! Look at your people! They killed 500 people just in Shushan. Wow, look at that! Can you imagine what they're doing outside of Shushan? Like, there's 500 people just here, and they must have killed thousands if you go throughout the empire, right? Crazy. His attitude is, look how great how great this is. I mean, it's insane in a way. His own people, his own citizens are killing each other, and he's sitting back going, "Wow, look at your people." I mean, it's bizarre. It's bizarre, but it's also seemingly very true. There's a truth to this, a weird feeling. Like you just wonder, could
It's
this
not
really?
unprecedented for a head of state to ignore a riot in the Capitol for a while.
No, well, it's definitely weird that he doesn't seem that concerned with his citizens killing each other.
Right.
But
Exactly.
there's this weird pride that he seems to take in what Esther's people are doing.
Mhm.
I just wonder. I just really wonder in the last year and a half, and I don't know, and I don't really want to know, but this story just is so weirdly relevant. I just wonder if there's any calls being made to Jared and Ivanka. What do you think about what Israel's doing right now? I wonder if that ever is happening in those conversations at any time when Hezbollah was blown up, with pagers or what. I wonder if there's ever any of those conversations. Isn't that weird? Donald Trump asking his daughter, what do you think about what your people are doing today? Taking a weird, perverse pride in this. You don't think that that could be happening? You don't
Oh,
think that that's happening?
I think it's if it's
I
not
think it's
happening,
I think it's
yeah.
eminently possible that that conversation happened either at a party that they had together or some other time when he's seen the Kushners, whether he said that to them. I don't know, but I think it's possible. I
I
think it's
have to
very
I,
possible.
I have to believe that there's some back channel, or not even back channel. They're talking.
But
Jared, I mean,
would that
he
not
re-
would that not seem possible that he's saying that to his daughter and son-in-law?
I mean, his grandchildren are Jewish, so
Oh, you don't think that? I think he might be bragging about, look at what I'm letting your people do right now. I'm telling you, it's eminently possible that that conversation happened. I let your people do this right now. He's kind of said the same thing to Pauline. He kind of said the same thing. He kind of said the same thing to the Jewish community. Look at what we've let Israel do.
I mean, the reality is,
I'm just telling you, it's eerily familiar.
well,
If the
well,
conversation didn't happen where he turned to his family, maybe not. But this feeling of what he said to us.
the last Republican who got as many Jewish votes as Trump did
Yeah.
was Richard Nixon. I mean,
Okay. Yes. But this idea that
you have to go back that far.
the Jews are taking care of business because I let you take care of the business. Fine, whatever. But it's weird. It's weird that we're living in a similar, eerily similar time. That's all I'm saying. Not exactly the same, but eerily similar. There's some weird pieces here. Maybe. I don't, yeah. Maybe, yes. Maybe he's not as proud of his daughter.
No, I think he's very proud of his daughter because Kushner gave him his biggest success, his biggest
Okay.
foreign policy, which was the Abraham Accords.
Abraham Accords. Okay.
And no matter what, I don't even care how much you may dislike or hate Donald Trump. That was, I mean, pulling that off was as big a foreign policy success as there has ever been.
Yep. All right. Well, let's finish this up. This weird let's look at this weird ending here, which is the 10 sons got killed. And look,
If,
again, what else do you want, Esther?
if it please your majesty, Esther replied, let the Jews in Shushan be permitted to act tomorrow also as they did today, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on the stake. The king ordered that this should be done, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan. Haman's 10 sons were impaled, and the Jews in Shushan mustered again on the 14th day of Adar and slew 300 men in Shushan. But they did not lay hands on the spoil. The rest of the Jews, those in the king's provinces, likewise mustered and fought for their lives. They disposed of their enemies, killing 75,000 of their foes, but they did not lay hands on the spoil. That was
Well,
on
so
the
they were
13th.
given permission to, and they decided not to. But they killed 75,000 people. So 500 the first day, 300 the next day, just in Shushan. And then you add that up through the rest of the empire, 75,000 people decided that they were still our enemies. You still had to be our enemies after all that they saw. Again, what truth there is to that? These people still wanted to be our enemies. The Houthis are still launching missiles at Israel. This little whatever in Yemen, this group are launching missiles at Israel. Israel is in the process of taking out their sponsor, literally taking out the people that gave them the weapons. you'd wonder at what point do the Houthis say, nah, we're out of this fight. We're done. We've had enough. No, they haven't had enough. Iran is in any day going to sue for peace, right? But the Houthis decide they still want to launch missiles at us, at Israel. It's insane. It defies logic, but they're still doing it. You know, I told you before. I warned you about this a couple of years ago. I actually at services posted up. I held up the Houthi flag on it that says "Death to Israel, Death to America, Death to the Jews, Curse the Jews." It says it on their flag. Said most of you are on that flag 3 times. Yep, they're still at it. So I guess it's going to continue. So that's the party. Here we go.
So that was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and they rested on the 14th day and made it a day of feasting and merrymaking. But the Jews in Shushan mustered on both the 13th and 14th days, and so rested on the 15th and made it a day of feasting and merrymaking. That is why village Jews who live in unwalled towns observe the 14th day of the month of Adar and make it a day of merrymaking and feasting and as a holiday and an occasion for sending gifts to one another. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent dispatches to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus, near and far, charging them to observe the 14th and 15th days of Adar every year, the same days on which the Jews enjoyed relief from their foes, and the same month that had been transformed for them from one of grief and mourning to one of festive joy. They were to observe them as days of feasting and merrymaking, and as an occasion for sending gifts to one another and presents to the poor. The Jews, accordingly, assumed as an obligation that which they had begun to practice, and that Mordecai prescribed for them.
Yep. And so here we understand that the Jews started celebrating Purim to celebrate this. The Jews celebrated on those days the 14th and 15th Adar, which in no way is connected to the fact that that's the Persian New Year. And that, this is literally, I guess I told you, the reason why we celebrate this holiday. Because this isn't even the day that Haman was killed. This wasn't the day that Esther saved the people. This was the day that the Jews got to kill everyone who had tried to attack them. I get it. Okay. So it's a day of celebration, but it also is, again, a day that allowed us to celebrate the day that everyone else was doing these things. Throughout the Persian Empire, people spent these days having feasts, drinking, sending gifts to one another, and giving presents to the poor. It's all, it's all good times, but yeah, it's Persian New Year. Nowruz, what we call Nowruz, which is still celebrated by Persian Jews to this day. Nowruz. It's also celebrated by Persians who live outside of Iran. They celebrate it in Iran, but not with alcohol, not with the same intensity, because it is, of course, the spring. It is tied to pagan fertility rites and things that go back much longer than the religions that we have today. So, yeah, the Persians maybe, God willing, next year will get to celebrate Nowruz the way they used to, with a lot of feasting, with a lot of joy, and the same way that their Jewish and non-Jewish Persian diaspora gets to celebrate Nowruz. Because if you go to LA, there's Nowruz parties in LA. Not so much in Santa Clarita, but in Beverly Hills and other places like that, you'll see it. And who knows, maybe next year, maybe next Nowruz. And this is the end. And again, what did they do? They did the holiday that Mordecai said it. And when it says that they did the obligation, they took on this obligation. This is where the rabbis infer not only did at this moment, and I want to make this point, it's a big point. The Jews, after the destruction of the temple, the first temple, and here in Persia, take on responsibilities. Not because They live in the land of Israel, not because they have to, because God told them at Mount Sinai that they had to, or that the mountain is turned over them, which is what we read in the Midrash, we read in the Talmud a couple of weeks ago, as we read about Shavuot, that God literally held Mount Sinai over the people and said, "You have no choice." No, there they had a choice, and they took on, it says, this obligation. They assumed the obligation. And the rabbis say it's not about Purim, it's about everything. It's all the commandments. That at this moment, the Jews said, we took it on. And we take it on not because we're afraid, not because we live in the land of Israel, not because we're living in a situation where we don't have lots of other choices, but this is a critical moment in Jewish history where diaspora communities, where Jews in a non, to some extent, non-theological imperative take this on. And I didn't invent that. There are Orthodox rabbis, or I'd say more modern Orthodox rabbis, who've said that this is the moment. Well, the rabbi said it initially, that when the Jews take on the obligation, when it says they did lasot, that they've said this for a long, this is in the Talmud. But the more modern interpretation is to understand that this moment is the moment after Mount Sinai, over 1,000 years later, where we said we're going to continue to do this, and we didn't have to. We wanted to. We said we are Jewish people. So here it is. This is the Purim.
For Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the foe of all the Jews, had plotted to destroy the Jews and had cast Pur, that is the lot, with intent to crush and exterminate them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded, with the promulgation of this decree, let the evil plot that he devised against the Jews recoil on his own head. So they impaled him and his sons on the stake. For that reason, these days were named Purim after Pur. In view, then, of all the instructions in the said letter, and of what they had experienced in that matter, and what had befallen them, the Jews undertook and irrevocably obligated themselves and their descendants, and all who might join them, to observe these 2 days in the manner prescribed and at the proper time each year.
Yep, we took it on. We took on more than that, but we took on that.
Consequently, these days are recalled and observed in every generation by every family, every province, and every city. And these days of Purim shall never cease among the Jews, and the memory of them shall never perish among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, wrote a second letter of Purim for the purpose of confirming with full authority the aforementioned one of Mordecai the Jew.
And if you just notice, this is the first time that they mentioned who her father was. Very interesting. Avichail. This is the first time that it said that, right? It didn't say that before. It didn't say her father's name. Now it says her father's name. It affirms who her father was. And it says that she gave full authority to Mordecai.
Dispatches were sent to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the realm of Ahasuerus with an ordinance of equity and honesty. These days of Purim shall be observed at their proper time, as Mordecai the Jew, and now Queen Esther, has obligated them to do, and just as they have assumed for themselves and their descendants the obligation of the fasts with their lamentations. And Esther's ordinance validating these observances of Purim was recorded in a scroll.
Yeah, the scroll of Esther. When this is explaining how we have this book. So we have to celebrate Purim because Mordecai and Esther commanded us to. We obligated ourselves to do it. We said we're going to do it. And we said that our descendants will do it too. This is a holiday, an explanation for a holiday. The entire last chapter is nothing but a very clear attempt at trying to tell us why we celebrate a holiday. This is all about the holiday. The whole last chapter is about why we celebrate this holiday. I mean, it seems a little much. It definitely seems like it's either added on later or the purpose of the story was to get us to this, which is this scroll is all about why you need to celebrate a holiday. You thought the story was an interesting story. It was a funny story. It was a inspiring story. It was a truthful story. No, it's why we keep it. And then the last chapter is literally these 3 verses.
King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the mainland and the islands. All his mighty and powerful acts, and a full account of the greatness to which the king advanced Mordecai, are recorded in the annals of the kings of Media and Persia.
Yeah, and if you want to watch that episode or if you want to watch that series, that prequel, you can go to the annals to read that if you want to read more about it.
For Mordecai the Jew ranked next to King Ahasuerus and was highly regarded by the Jews and popular with a multitude of his brethren. He sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all his kindred.
And they lived happily ever after. Now, I will tell you, it's not a happily ever after story because the story really ends with the murder of all the enemies of the Jews, and then a party, of course. But yeah, it's not exactly what you thought because we think it's about the death of Haman and Esther surviving and whatever, and of course it's not because the stage is much bigger. It's now become much bigger. So that is a weird, it's a weird ending. There's no doubt. And again, it seems to be very important that we read this. I will tell you that our enemies they know about this story sometimes better than we do because we unfortunately are not as knowledgeable about our own stuff. But the Nazis they knew about this story. You wonder how any enemy of the Jews, right? The Nazis, because there were enough Christians that were, that were Nazis that knew the biblical story of Esther. But you wonder how people who know this story or are familiar with it at any level, how do they read this story and then say, yeah, the Jewish people are good people to attack? I mean, you wonder how that happens. And it has been pointed out, and I will point it out as we finish up today, because I always need to share this when we finish. And again, we say, Tam v'neshalem tehillah el borei olam. We give praise and thanks to God, the creator of everything. When we finish a book, that we learn about the death of the 10 sons of Haman, and it seems like a kind of a kind of superficial detail, superfluous detail. It's not something that we really need. The rabbis point out again that there's nothing unnecessary in the Bible, and there's these sons that we read about. They must have been mentioned for a reason. We've been reading them for centuries. When you're reading this, you have to go through these names, and they're really hard names to read. Parshan Dada Dalphon Stop. You got to read these names, and some people read it all in one breath. It's they're not easy names. They're Persian names, Aramaic, Persian, kind of like versions of the names. They're not easy, but it's been pointed out. Some people noticed that for over 2,000 years, we write the names of the 10 sons in strange ways. In that, in every Megillah, there's 3 letters that are small, which is the Taf here, the Shin here, and the Zayin here. So you see that there's 3 letters. In every scroll for 2,000 years, these letters have been written in small forms. You see that? The Zayin is small. The Shin is small. These are scribal traditions. We don't know why they exist. There's some smaller letters and bigger letters in the Torah scroll. So these are scribal traditions that people have kept for a long time. But this is an interesting code, and I'm not very into codes in the Bible, but this one was always fascinated me. The numerical equivalent of what this adds up to, Taf Shin Zayin, is the numerical equivalent to a year. And the year that it actually comes out to, and you can look this up, this is a fact, that it comes out to 1946. the year 707 on our calendar, 5707 was 1946. And because we don't usually use the first Hebrew letter, but it would be Tafshin. It would be Tafshin Zayin. So we don't write, when we write out 5707, we don't write the five. Even today, we write out 785. That's what our year is this year. So Tafshin, Tafshin, Tafshin Zayin would be 1946. In 1946, there were the Nuremberg trials, and there were 10 Nazis that were hung. Now, what was interesting about that was that there wasn't supposed to be 10, there were supposed to be 12. One of them was one of their um, one of their it was strange because one of the Nazis had their, of the 12 that were supposed to be executed at Nuremberg, had his sentence commuted to life imprisonment. And then one of them, Goering, killed himself in prison. So in the end, 10 were executed. These were the head Nazis. These were the ones that were the most, vile and horrible people. And so some people have noticed that it's strange that those 10 sons had a modern equivalent. And so again, that's been written for thousands of years with those little letters. So somebody had pointed out that very strange year code is there. Yeah.
We were talking earlier about, I was telling earlier about how we took out Admiral Yamamoto. Well, here's a little bit of interesting history for you. The 10 Nazis who were hanged, their bodies were cremated and their ashes were dumped into a gutter during a rainstorm, and their ashes washed into the sewers. Now, why is that interesting? What did we do with bin Laden's body? We flew it out to the middle of the Indian Ocean and dumped it.
You're talking about Osama bin Laden, yeah.
Yeah, because
our modern day Haman. Yeah, I know.
Right, what they did not want
Yeah.
are these they didn't want a burial site, a grave site to become a gathering place or a monument for the Nazis. So that's what they did.
I also have a question going back to that. Why do we not take out, why is our policy not to take out leaders?
The
Well, we
United
took out
States,
Saddam
why is the
Hussein.
United States' policy?
Yeah, because we don't want our leaders.
It's an interesting thing. And many people say it goes back to the way that people have fought wars for thousands of years, which is, the kind of the rules of warfare where the leaders don't get killed unless they go into combat. So if a king leads his men into combat, he risks his life. But if he doesn't, if he sits off to the side and watches it all happen, then if his army loses, he can be captured, he can be held for ransom. But generally speaking, we don't execute the leaders of the country. It's a terrible, if you think about it, it's a terrible kind of chivalry that's existed for a long time. But it's not the way, again, you could say that that it's not justice, if you will, but it's a similar thing to that I shared with you the story of the fact that King Saul keeps King Agag alive. That there's this kind of understanding that leaders have a feeling like they confer on their enemies, the head enemy, this certain kind of dignity that I want to be spared, so I'm going to spare you while millions of other people die in their battles and their fights. So yeah, there's something inherently unfair about it, but it's existed for a long time, and it's definitely was part of European, battle.
It didn't.
Well, Mark,
They didn't want the idea of royal blood
Yes.
called into question.
Well,
Yes.
and also,
But it's a certain, again, there's a certain it's unfair. I mean, there's a certain lack of fairness to that I think especially we as Americans understand, because we don't have we haven't had kings. We haven't had this idea that somebody should be above it, and it upset us if even if a political leader, it used to be that political leaders had to serve, that we expected them to serve, and then that kind of stopped about 40 years ago. And at some level they had to serve, right? Even if they were, in the studio division, there was some idea that you still served, and that as a look, I'm not going to get into it, but there was a certain kind of expectation that if you ordered people into combat, that you had served, yourself. We've lost that, and again, in the United States, I have a different feeling of it, being raised in America and having respect for people, who serve. Yeah, I find it upsetting when people who haven't served are so are so
Mark,
easily sending other people to their deaths.
Mark,
Yes.
how much of this let's not kill the leader, maybe not now, but it's an inheritance, if you will, of the whole concept of divine right of kings. You don't
Yeah,
want
yeah. No, that's
yeah,
what Rosemary's saying.
yeah.
I mean,
You don't want to
she,
kill
y- y-
somebody who's been nominated or
of
elected by
course, because
God.
if you can kill somebody, if the king can kill the other king, then he can be killed. So,
Yeah.
yes, there's this
And it's
idea that
God.
we don't want to see any king be killed because kings can't be killed. They're God. Yes, there is definitely that even, again, you can understand that. And again, for us, it's not the way it's supposed to be, as Americans, I'm saying. And to some extent as Jews too. Because the only king was supposed to be God. And when God gave King Saul the commandment to kill Agag, he should have followed it, not because, again, he was showing deference to a king, which it seems like he's doing. He follows it because he's not really king. He's ruling for God. He's there as a representative for God. In our understanding of what a king was supposed to be, the king was the emissary, was the elected official, if you will, for God. God is the one who gets to choose it. It's not like the people get to choose it, but understanding that the king is there because God said he could be there is a similar idea, which is you don't get to be there unless we say you get to be there, or in some cases, you're not the final say. You are not God. And that was one of the things that the Jewish kings were supposed to understand, that they were not divine. There was not a divine right, that they were chosen by God. But that didn't mean that, number one, the God couldn't take that choice back, couldn't revoke that, as he did with Saul. But that you're there because God said you could be there, not for any other reason. So, yeah, there's a certain humility to that the kings were supposed to have. And remember, the kings of Israel and Judah were supposed to have a Torah scroll with them to remember that God is God is the law, and there's a higher law that they work for. Again, the modern equivalents to this are chilling and are, again, something that we read. And when we read these stories, how do we not read them and get affected by it? So, thank you, Rosemary, for taking
you,
us
Rabbi.
through the book of Esther. We are going to be here next week to start the next book of the Bible. We're going to be moving away. And again, how could this story is so farcical, right? It's so funny, but yet it's not funny. It's so true, even though it's totally not factual. And it's why it's one of my favorite books, not least of which is The Hero is a Woman. And the book is named after a woman. And the irony, of course, is that for so long, women didn't actually get to make the decisions. And fortunately now in some countries, they get to. And hopefully one day in America, there'll be a woman who actually gets to exercise power out in front too. But we'll see.